Good day and welcome to today's Capital One Listening and Leading webinar. We are pleased to offer this session brought to you by the CoSIDA Advocacy Committee. Today's topic is Survivor, Facing and Acing the Year in Review. As we come out of the pandemic, our panelists will discuss how we organize our work and achievements to prepare for a self-evaluation or how we present our work and achievements to supervisors in a performance review. My name is Beth Challoner, the University of Toronto's Manager of Marketing, Events and Athletic Communication, and a member of the Advocacy Committee, and I will serve as the webinar moderator. We appreciate you joining us today. But before I introduce the panelists, I would like to say a quick thank you to corporate partner Capital One, presenting sponsor of CoSIDA's Professional Development and Continuing Education Series. As a reminder, we are recording this webinar, and when it is available on CoSIDA.com, you can either watch it as an on-demand session on CoSIDA's YouTube channel or listen and download it as a podcast. Please invite your colleagues to listen and watch this, as it is free for everyone. Just a quick note to thank not only today's guest, but all of the amazing individuals who have contributed to CoSIDA's webinar series. This webinar is the 36th Professional Development and Continuing Education session over the last 10 months that CoSIDA and its members have produced for our members and colleagues in college athletics. Now, here are today's guest panelists. Kenisha Rhone, Director of Digital Media and Social Strategy at Belmont University. Steve Flegel, Assistant AD, Sports Information at Whitworth University. And Kevin Trainor, Senior Associate AD, Public Relations at Arkansas. For today's session, we wanted to do it as a bit of a roundtable, a conversation amongst colleagues, and really talk to the things we've learned, the elements we faced, and how we survived. Most importantly, how do we evaluate, advocate, and communicate what we've been through this past year to our bosses, our supervisors, or even ourselves? How do we tangibly grasp all that we've accomplished over the last year? I'm going to start and throw this question to Kenisha first. What have you learned in surviving the past year? What skills did you reuse or learn for the first time to ensure their work was getting done?
First, I want to say thank you to CoSIDA for hosting us today. This is awesome, and it's been great to be a part of the advocacy committee with this group. I do want to remind folks that a lot of us took advantage of the fact that NACDA and everything under the umbrella had free membership last year, and a lot of us just signed up to find out what was going on in those other groups. And that was the first thing that I remembered when I had downtime. Oh, let me see what NACMA is doing. Let me see what ICLA is doing. Let me see what all these great organizations, what sessions they're having, because now I have time to be able to do so. And so that was one of the best resources for me to be able to dig in and find out other perspectives on things that we were doing by using a free resource that was just handy. And so I started to document that and tried to make sure that I attended at least or listened to at least 2 sessions a week from anyone. As well as looking at some of the other professional organizations I'm a part of. PRSA had a lot of great webinars over the last year. And so plugging in and finding out what they were doing, some of their free offerings, there were just so many opportunities for us to expand our wheelhouse and find out things from places that were offering free content. And so I think that we overlooked that because it was playing in the background while you were doing game notes or playing in the background while you were getting ready for an event. But those were great opportunities for us to learn and expand and figure out how we can pitch to other people that we didn't just spend 12 hours doing game notes. But the other thing that we probably did during this time is try out new things. Like I love Clubhouse and I used it a lot, but I also tried to figure out, is this something we can use in the athletic department? And so how can I best utilize this tool or not utilize this tool and figure out what will and what won't work for us. But that, I would not have done that if it had not been for the pandemic and having to utilize a new tool. I mean, it just came out in the last year. So having time to vet it and figure out what that was and follow other people as they make goofs and make sure it wasn't, you know, on my brand to make sure that Belmont was covered. But to find out that things like that were fantastic for us to say, this is great for our student athletes to look at or not. We should steer them away from these kinds of things. So it's just been a great way for us to reach out and again, expand that wheelhouse. And the last thing I'll say is that since we did have quote unquote downtime, we were able to answer a lot more emails from fans and from parents and grandparents, or those inboxes on Facebook from someone who couldn't find where a live stats link was, and then generating a conversation with them that we probably didn't have time for because we were so go before. Now we took the extra time to build those relationships with folks, and so now they may have only been fans of their particular sport of their child or grandchild, and now they care more about the institution as a whole. So I just want to encourage people to not overlook all those amazing things that we did in our free time, quote unquote, because we were using it whether we thought about it or not.
Those are some great points, and something like, I think for me, the professional development was something I didn't think of that you probably did more of that could enhance some of the your elements within your own wheelhouse, but it's not something you generally think of to kind of assess and add into the conversation, to the mix. So that's awesome. Thank you for pointing that out.
Sure.
Kenisha, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm curious, can you think off the top of your head of 2 or 3 tidbits that you picked up from some of those other organizations that you know I'm going to continue using those in my job going forward?
Oh gosh, there were so many. I think that one of the things that I heard on a DEI conversation amongst senior leaders was someone using TV and saying that TV is so important. And so I was like, oh, why is television important? They were like, no, transparency and vulnerability are so important to our business. And so we need to make sure that we are walking around as TV sets to make sure that we are connecting with people in a different way. And it was just such a small thing, but it stuck with me because I think that our student athletes can grasp onto that. And that's a concept that they understand already. And it's something that we practice while we're trying to connect with student athletes and connect with administrators as we're onboarding them. And so now we have a phrase that we can toss around that makes it easier to do that.
That is a great tidbit, and definitely something. I like the TV. I may even steal that one myself. That's excellent.
Please do. I wish I could remember who started it, but it was, again, something so small, but it made so much sense. It made so much sense.
Yeah.
What about y'all? What did you do on your campuses or your home office?
Well, I think like many people, this is an industry that we pride ourselves on being a little bit of the technological experts in our area and being able to do that. But, for all of us, whether it was Microsoft Teams or Zoom or any of the other platforms, we all had to learn not just how to get on a Zoom call, but all of a sudden we were thrust into learning how to run a Zoom call, how to do the Q&A, how to get a transcript, how to allow people in and out of the weight room. All of these things go back to the operations that we normally would be doing. It's instead of setting up a press conference and setting up microphones and having moderators, we're doing that digitally. And so like many things we do in this industry, it's not just having a somewhat working knowledge of it. You needed to get into the details and learn exactly how everything worked, allowing media to record Zoom calls, and just learning all the details. So, as I talk to colleagues around the country, they were digging in, trading ideas and notes with each other about the nuances of a program that maybe a year ago we didn't know anything about. And so certainly that was something across the board, not just in our profession, but I think members of CoSIDA and people in our industry have an ability to dig in and really get to the core of things quickly. Let's be honest, we figure it out because we've got to figure it out and to get the job done. And so I saw that even with other colleagues that use Zoom, we were very quick adapters in our industry because not only were we using it for ourselves, we were using it to meet the needs of those for our programs, for our conferences, or whatever our organizations are. We were trying to meet the needs that they have, and sometimes they weren't quite sure what they needed, but we were there and knew how to deliver it even in that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
That's another great point. That is absolutely. I know on our campus, doing that whole production element on the back end of teams to produce those segments. And we've been asked to do a lot across a kind of the university, not just within athletics. So it's a good skill that we kind of scooped up. We learned, like you said, we learned quickly, a lot of broadcast elements to it, but you kind of figure it out. And now we're producing these virtual events in various capacities. So absolutely agree with that. Now that we've talked about kind of a lot of these things we've learned, Steve, I want to throw this question to you first. And how do you organize all of this, like for yourself and others, but how do you organize all these skills, these new tasks, and everything that you kind of undertook this year and that you've accomplished, and kind of lay that out so that you understand what you actually did, and how do you convey that to others?
Yeah, Mary Beth, in a way, what I did is I took the year and I have the pre-sports section of the year and then the sports section of the year. And so in the pre-sports section of the year that for Whitworth and for many of us occurred in the fall up until January, we had to create all of our own content. And so we did that for our website, for our social media, for YouTube. And so what I did with that is I've created kind of a virtual portfolio that I can present digitally to my supervisor and show them these are the things that we did. These are the content areas that we did that engaged our student athletes, that engaged our alumni, that engaged our fans, that kept parents involved. And it was really important because those folks were hungry. They didn't have it. They were stuck too. They were looking for entertainment as well. So for us to be able to provide opportunities to engage with our fan base. So I took screenshots of web pages. I put together links to YouTube videos and put it all into kind of a document that I can easily email to my supervisor in advance of the review. And then for the sports part of the year, basically put together a spreadsheet that showed all of the hours that I worked on each sport. And it shows not only the total number of hours that I worked over weeks or months or any period of time, but also how those things overlap and stacked on top of one another. And it becomes a really valuable visual tool to show to anybody, boy, this is what this year looked like, and this is what we had to contribute to make this work for all of these student athletes who wanted to have a chance to compete and wanted to have a chance to have a somewhat normal season. This is what we had to do to make that work.
What does that spreadsheet look like? I'm almost afraid to
Well, it's several pages, and it's going to be, at first glance, it's going to be hard for somebody to say, what am I looking at? But then once I kind of detail it and explain it, then that's going to be, wow, that was a lot of time. That was a lot of effort.
Way more effective than pointing to the gray hairs you might have sprouted during the overlap season.
Yeah, this has definitely changed already too.
What I love about that, Steve, is that everybody talks about the hours they put in and the work they put in, but being able to show that and being able to track that, I think has a real impact. And, you know, people, there's not a single person in any one of the departments that we all work in that doesn't feel like that they put in a lot of time. But what is unique to our industry, what is unique to the crossover seasons that we've seen as part of this pandemic, is just the additional responsibility. And so I think sometimes we all don't do a good job of substantiating and supporting our own argument with our supervisors, and not argument, but just support
the case
we're giving. And so I think that's a fantastic idea. I know I'm sure at times it was a pain to kind of go back and look at that, but what a tremendous resource to be able to present when you go in to talk about the year.
And Kevin, I want to address that too, because you're right. Initially, the first thought when I thought about doing that, it was like, oh, I don't have time to do that. I don't have time to sit down and put that together. But You know, we are masters of working smarter and not harder. So we know for a home week in football, basically the snapshot of what the hours look like through the course of the week and then on to that Saturday. For a home week in basketball, for us, we have home doubleheaders on Friday and Saturday. Our women and men both play. I know what those hours look like. And so it's figuring out, okay, what does a week for basketball look like? What does a week for football look like? What does a week for tennis look like? And they're going to all look different. But then you can take those and then plug them in to each slot that you've created on your spreadsheet for those time periods. And so you don't have to go back through every week and figure out, boy, what was I doing? As long as you know your schedule and how much time you spend for each home event, for each away event, you can plug those in, and then they start stacking on top of each other and building the picture.
I'm sure that helped your coaches have some grace once they saw, oh, you have 18 other things literally happening today. You're not exaggerating. There are literally 18 things on this sheet that I'm seeing. It's okay. You can put that up as soon as you get to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
You would hope so anyways, right? You would hope that would be the response from your coaches is like, oh my gosh. But I think the visual presentation for me, I think for a lot of people to present that and to Kevin, to your point, to actually have something physically to show somebody and say, this is what this looks like to me. Like, I'm not just talking, you know, out of thin air. I'm not grasping at straws and making up numbers and telling you I'm working a lot. This is actually what happened this day, this week, this hour. So I love the idea of that visual presentation.
Yeah, for sure. Wish I had thought of that.
Yeah. Did you say, I wish I had thought of that? Is that
I had thought of that.
Past your review? Now, Kevin, I'm going to throw this one to you and start the conversation here. And how do you quantify all this to your administration? Like, how do you take all this information and with a spreadsheet, how do you quantify this to your administrator and explain kind of what got done despite either lack of resource, minimal resources, and how do you reframe what actually happened this year so they understand?
Well, I hire Steve to do a spreadsheet for me. That's what I do after that discussion. No, that's a great question. I think it's something, you know, the thing that I love about my colleagues and the colleagues in this profession is that these are not men and women that spend a lot of time worrying about how much time it's going to take or what it's going to take. They just dig in and they do the job, whatever that takes. And I love that about us. But there's also some times where we don't take time. We are a great advocate and offer great PR for everyone in our department except ourselves. And so I think one of the challenges, and I've been blessed to be in this business for close to 30 years, and you have to reframe it a little bit and think and apply some of the same principles that we do for our coaches, for our student athletes, for our athletic directors, to ourselves. And again, in a way that is recognizing what we've done and what we've accomplished, and not in a bragging way, but just really laying out the facts. And when I think globally about what CoSIDA members have done over the past year, I look at a pandemic that stopped almost everything in its tracks. Almost everyone had less or practically nothing to do. If you're running event management, primarily, there are no events. If you're running tickets have ceased. If you're running all these different things, one of the things that did not, but became even more imperative, was communication. Communication to fill the channels that we have, either social media channels on the internet, communication with parents, communication with student athletes became imperative as we dealt with something that we had no idea about. There were lots of questions. When I think back of what we did here at the University of Arkansas, some of the most crucial communications we worked on were internal communications, letting student athletes know about what was available, what resources were available, what we could offer, how they were going to get home, when facilities were going to open back up for training, to parents who were concerned about their sons and daughters on our campus and how that would be handled when they came back. And so I think of different colleagues that slowed down, but this is an industry and this is a group of colleagues that really amped up because communications became even more imperative. Steve mentioned earlier, filling needs for content, whether that's reaching out to former student athletes, doing feature stories. That website was still up there. Those social media channels were still there. And just because your particular institution was not playing didn't mean your fans didn't want to engage. And so I think if we just start with that from a premise and think back of those things, we begin to remember things that we did and that our colleagues did around us to help fill that void. So that's the challenge, getting outside of our own mind of thinking that it's bragging, but just thinking about ways in which we responded in a trying time to help our organization.
We also have to think about the ways that we've had to challenge ourselves to mentor our graduate assistants and student assistants, because some of them were not even allowed in our spaces. So how do you tell someone who's a first year graduate assistant, it won't always be this way, and challenge ourselves to reassure them that the business will still be there, that there'll still be jobs. How do we still teach them how to write about an event when there's not an event? How do we teach them how to pull things from stats for their game notes when there's no games being played? It really challenged us to step up and think uniquely about things that we do all the time, but now we're being challenged with distance, or having someone sit. At some time we were 12 feet away before we became 6 feet away. So being in a room with someone and saying, here's how you use Stat Crew, having on a Zoom with somebody in the same room to be able to show them how to do Stat Crew. We had to be so creative in this space. And so I think, again, we just overlook those things because SIDs just get it done. We always find a way to make things happen. And I just think we overlooked all those great ways that we were mentors in this space, and even look to find mentors outside of this space, outside of the SID business, to be able to say, I need help with trying to figure out how to make this go. I need some ideas. And we were able to do that because everyone was in this collective boat having the same experience at the same time.
I agree. And one of the things I'm hearing a lot of is really we need to stop and take stock of what we did and really assess and write down all of these things. Because you're right, engaging with student staff over the course of the year in a virtual space, some of them are first year and haven't experienced, like you're trying to explain to them the experience that they're going to experience and what can we get done this year without X, X, Y, but don't worry, next year will be different, I promise. So I agree with you. It was a challenge. It was a challenge to keep morale up, to keep people stimulated and keep your staff engaged, never mind the outside and external audience and stakeholders. So yeah, I think it really is a time for us to not worry about bragging, to just really stop, take stock, write it down, and really fully assess yourself as to everything that you did accomplish.
And as you all have alluded to, not just take stock and quantify and qualify, but as Kevin said so well, we have to be our own best advocates of all years. This is the year where we as individuals, where we collectively as an organization need to be our own best advocates in our environments and with our supervisors, because as busy as we were, our supervisors, whoever they may be, they were just as busy, and they were going through as crazy a period of time that we were. And so it's very likely that they are not as aware of what we were doing on a day-to-day basis. And they need to be informed in the best way possible. And we can't be shy about, what? We made this boat go. We figured out a way to drive this ship and get us through to the other side.
Earlier, when we talked about skills, I mean, one of the biggest skills that we are problem solvers, and there were lots of problems. There were lots of challenges. There were lots of things to do differently than we'd ever done them before. But this is an organization of professionals that are in the room when it's tough, and they're making tough decisions and finding a way to get it done. And so I think that that's what separates us from some other professions within intercollegiate athletics, is we've got to find a way. And so, as Steve mentioned, we found a way. We've made it through it. There may have been times where we didn't think we were going to make it through it, how we were going to make it through it, but got to work. And so I think outlining that is a value beyond the organization that may be taken for granted in some instances, may not be noticed in some instances. And again, there are a lot of us, I'm blessed, there are a lot of us that are in organizations that see that, but just like it's impossible for us to be in someone else's chair and know all that they contribute, we can't sit back and let them we can't assume that they've seen all that has gone into this to help the organization move forward.
The other thing we need to do is to make sure that, like Steve said, even presenting that amazing document to our supervisors, but we need to say that's a skill now. You know, learning how to do DV sport because there were no student workers who usually run it. You had to be DV sport because they weren't allowed on campus or to be in your arenas at a particular time. Add that to your LinkedIn, because people actually get paid to do DV sport. You know, that's a real thing. And now it's a skill that you've developed, and you've learned the hard way how to make it work. You've learned how to juggle so many extra hats that you thought you'd never have to wear. But I think we need to advocate for ourselves, like Kevin said, and make sure that we tell other people this great skill set that we've developed over this time period, because sometimes everyone needs to know how fantastic SIDs are, aside from keeping stats and being great storytellers. We have so many other skills that we need to make sure that other people know, because when we design our job descriptions for assistants, these are now skills that we can ask. Hey, what did you come out of the pandemic with? What did you come out of that with? Did you pick up some extra things? Because we were able to do that here as an institution, as a department. But don't overlook putting that stuff on your LinkedIn, on your resume. It is fantastic gold stuff, because again, people get paid and they come into arena, they just sit down, they do DV sport, and they go home and they get paid for that. Wouldn't that be great for that to be your side job when you retire from being an SID, because you picked it up and it was something that you actually enjoyed doing?
All right, Mary Beth, we're going to put you on the hot seat. You have done a great job of moderating this panel, but you are a great professional of our organization. And what were some of the things that you learned? What are some of the skills and processes that you're going to take forward now as we venture out into what's next?
Oh, well, yes. Patience, the extra patience is something that you really had to, we really had to take, like, you had to be aware of. Like, I think working through this, managing staff, managing student athlete expectations, coaches' questions, like you said, the parents, the questions you were getting from the outside, you know, everyone just wanted sport back. They wanted events back. When were they coming back? To keep up that morale, to keep up, you know, and there was a lot of conversation, and there still is a lot of conversation around the mental health and well-being of students, and in particular student athletes, because you kind of took away that thing that they used a lot, right? And they used as I don't want to say as a crutch, but it was something that was an identity to them. So we had a lot of student athletes kind of reaching out, like, what's next? What are you doing? So you really had to engage in an exercise of mentorship, of listening, of understanding, and I won't say counseling, because that's not necessarily the role I had, but where to push them in what direction. We had on our campus, we actually didn't have sport period this year. So they found out some of our winter sports, or they found out in the fall that they actually weren't going to have a season. So how do you keep those student athletes engaged? How do you keep your audience engaged and your fan base engaged? How do you keep, you know, the incoming students who haven't stepped foot in your campus or into venues or into games? How do you get them engaged in the process? So it was an exercise in futility, really, to figure out from day to day, week to week, month to month, how we were going to present things, angle things, change things to engage those audiences and those students and those student athletes and even our coaches at times. So it was an interesting process for us, but you take an exercise in patience. You learn how to take some deep breaths, and you learn how to work through it together and kind of keep, like Steve was mentioning, keeping that ship steered in the right direction was definitely something you learn to be a captain. I guess is one of the ways to put it. So yeah, so that's what we took from up here. And there's probably a long list of other things. Again, I'm gonna have to sit down. I'm going to take in what Steve said and what you said. I'm going to take stock of exactly kind of what's happened. And I'm going to use Steve's spreadsheet idea to kind of lay it all out there and really assess everything that we did without events and without games on campuses and student athletes on our campus. What we're going to do is just I'm going to ask each of you to give me, in this kind of final segment, if you will, give me 20 seconds of your, a tip or a trick that you have for anyone listening today. So we'll start with Kenisha.
I would remind everyone to practice self-care. If you're doing that amazing spreadsheet that Steve mentioned, look at all the hours that you've put in at your desk, at arenas, at football fields, at wherever you have participated in an activity, and make sure that you take time for yourself. We pour into so many other people as media relations folks, and this is the best time to take care of yourself in this time. We're taking care of everyone else during this time. Take care of ourselves.
Steve.
As hard as it is to be evaluated by someone else and to feel like you are being put on the spot, that's a great reminder to offer grace to those around you, the students who work for you, the coaches who work with you, your family members. We've all been through a heck of a year, and we've all had to deal with so much that we never expected to have to deal with in our lifetimes, and learn how to do things completely new. So it's a great reminder for us as we're being evaluated to offer grace to those who we interact with every day.
Absolutely. Kevin.
If you hear anything that we've said today, be reminded, you are not alone. You are in a group of professionals and colleagues and friends that want to help. So if you're intimidated, if it's been a rough year, you need some help in preparing for that year-end evaluation and how to first use the resources that you have. Anyone on this call would be willing to work with you, to visit with you, to help you see through lenses that are not your own. And also, if not one of us, reach out to a trusted colleague, a friend, someone at another institution, someone in your league or your conference. They know what you're going through more so than anyone else. So use those resources and reach out, visit. I find that is where I get the best advice, is from the men and women that are sitting in my chair, know what our challenges are. And so just encourage you to reach out, ask questions, and prepare yourself for the year-end evaluation and the year ahead. So reach out, let us be a help.
Thank you for all of this, you guys. It's been a great conversation. And I hopefully one that when people listen in or watch this will really sit down and appreciate the information that we provided, and maybe some tools and some tips and tricks to help them through the end of this period that they've survived, and to know that they've survived and they've survived it, well, and they've made it through. So again, if I can conclude here, I just want to thank Capital One for sponsoring CoSIDA's professional development and education programming. For those watching and listening to this pre-recorded session, thank you for joining us today and whatever day you're watching us on. We encourage you to check out CoSIDA.com for updated information on our on-demand professional development opportunities and what's on tap for June's virtual convention. That convention takes place online June 7th to 10th, and all current CoSIDA members are automatically registered for it. Please check CoSIDA.com for details on the virtual program, divisional day programming, the virtual 5K run walk, the virtual exhibit hall, our CoSIDA 21 Open, which is an online golf tournament in partnership with Next Step Solution, and much, much more. Thank you again for being with us today.